Okay, Boker Tov, Shavua Tov. So we are moving our way through Masechet Makkot, Daf Yud Tet Amud Bet. We now move on to a new topic today. Again, it's going to be a little bit technical. We're still dealing with Podshim to an extent, dealing with Tuman Ta'ara, so somewhat technical. If I'm going too fast or things aren't clear, please feel free to stop me, to ask, and to go back if need be. So if you have a look, we're about 4 lines from the top. 4 lines from the top of the daf. The previous line, that we have 2 dots, and the Gemara says Kodshei Kodashim v'chulei. So we now have a quote back from our Mishnah. So if we just go back to our Mishnah for a moment and see what it's talking about. So you see the Mishnah is on Daf Yud Zayin Amud Aleph. Mishnah tells us, we were going through, we had a list. We've been discussing Bikurim at length. We're now moving on from Bikurim onto the next one. And we have a list of different Isurim for which one would get Makkot. So the Mishnah said, "Auchel bikurim ajlo kara aleim." Okay, kodshei kodashim chutz leklaim, kodashim kalim umaser sheni chutz lechoma. So all different foods, which if you eat them outside of their designated area, you would get Makkot. Included in that list was kodshei kodashim outside the Azara, kodashim kalim outside the walls, and also what we're going to focus on now is maser sheni. Said the Mishnah, Maser Sheni chutz lechoma. Right, Maser Sheni has to be eaten. Just a quick reminder: this is the second tithe which is taken in the 1st, 2nd, 4th, and 5th year. The 3rd and the 6th year we have Maser Oni, but Maser Sheni, which even nowadays we take it, and what we do perform pidyon because we are unable to eat it, but it's brought and it's eaten by the owners in Yerushalayim and Biktusha B'Tahara. Within the walls of Yerushalayim. If it cannot be brought, so then you can perform pidyon, and the sanctity transfers onto money. So the Mishnah here tells us that if you eat Maser Sheni chutz lechoma, you get Makkot. Now the problem is, if you go back to the Mishnah at the beginning of the Perek, I'm doing a lot of flipping back and forth today, but if you go back to Daf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, you will notice that the Mishnah said, it was a long time ago, but what is the Mishnah over there also mentions Maser Sheni. About halfway down the Mishnah, it tells us, right, Achal tevel Maser Rishon shelo nitla tumato, u'Maser Sheni ve'ekdesh shelo nifdu. Meaning, if you ate Maser Sheni, that was not you had not performed pidyon. We just said Maser Sheni you're meant to eat. So clearly here the Mishnah is talking about where you ate it chutz lechoma. So the Mishnah in Daf Yud Gimel tells me that if you eat Maser Sheni chutz lechoma, you'll get Makkot. And then the Mishnah Daf Yud Zayin tells me that if you eat Maser Sheni chutz lechoma, you get Makkot. I mean, I already know this. There are enough things, there are enough lavim for the Mishnah to go through without mentioning the same thing twice. So that is the Gemara's question. The Gemara, we're now back on Yud Tet Amud Bet. Right, says the Gemara after the 2 dots, Tanina chada zimna. Right, we've already taught it once. Where? In that first Mishnah. Tanina chada zimna, Maser Sheni ve'ekdesh shelo nifdu. That's the direct quote. So why does the Mishnah now come along and mention Maser Sheni again? Amar Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina, Seifa b'Maser Sheni ta'or v'gavra ta'or, t'ka'achil chutz lechoma, Reisha Maser Sheni tameh v'gavra tameh v'ka'achile b'Yerushalayim. So here where the Gemara says Reisha and Seifa, it's referring to the different Mishnayot. Sometimes we say Reisha and Seifa. Reisha means first and Seifa means last. Right? Sometimes you'll just have a statement or you'll just have a Braita. And it will tell us the Reisha, the first din of the Braita, or the last din of the Braita. Or it will tell us Reisha and Seifa regarding one Mishnah. Sometimes Reisha and Seifa, is referring to 2 different Mishnayot. We have this, by the way, the beginning of Masechet Brachot as well, where the Gemara invokes different Mishnayot in terms of how many brachot we say before and after Kriyat Shema, and it mentions Reisha and Seifa going to different Mishnayot. Also, when you bear in mind that the Mishnah was composed, we have sometimes the way the Mishnayot are grouped in the text of the Mishnah that we have, or the way that they're grouped in the Gemara, or even different versions of the Mishnah are grouped differently. The Mishnayot were composed, put together as one long Perek, and sometimes the breaks in between them can be somewhat arbitrary. So therefore, we view it all as one long thing. So therefore, it says, Reisha and Seifa. So says the Gemara as follows. Why do I need to tell you twice? What is the difference between both instances where the Mishnah mentions Maaser Sheni. So we say like this. Seifa, the later one, meaning that which we've just said now, on Daf Yud Zayin, so that is talking about the following case. The Maaser Sheni Tahor, the Gavra Tahor, the Ka'achil Chutz Lachoma. Right? What does it say there? It says there explicitly that if you were to eat the Maaser Sheni Chutz Lachoma. So that's talking about a case, even if the food is Tahor, and even if the person who's eating it is Tahor, but nonetheless, it's eaten outside of the walls of Yerushalayim. For that, one is going to get Makkot, right? You might have thought that the Makkot's only going to be if you're Tameh, but even if you're Tahor. So here the Mishnah, the Gemara says, it says the, right? It's talking about a case, it's a sefer of Maaser Sheni Tahor, the Gavra Tahor, right, where both the one eating it and the food itself is Tahor, and it was eaten outside of Yerushalayim. Nonetheless, one will get Makkot for that. Okay. Reisha, however, the previous Mishnah is talking about something else. It says, Reisha b'Maaser Sheni Tameh, v'Gavra Tameh, v'Ka'ach Elei b'Yerushalayim. There it's talking about where the Maaser Sheni itself was Tameh, and the person who's eating it was Tameh, and you ate it in Yerushalayim. So here, the question is not, it's not marked for eating it outside of its designated area, but it's for eating it betum'ah. So Tosfot just points out over here where it says, because here it says Maaser Sheni Tameh v'Gavra Tameh, the meaning and, meaning both the food itself was Tameh and the person who's eating it was Tameh. Says Tosfot here, top of the page, he says, O Okama, it says it's sufficient that one of them, either the food is Tameh or the person who's eating it is Tameh. Obviously, right? If the person was Tameh, once they touch the food becomes Tameh as well. But just one of those would be sufficient. One would get Malkot. Right? The simple understanding of the Gemara as well is that when it says Ka'achile b'Yerushalayim, means that even if you ate it in Yerushalayim, you would still get Malkot. There are those who understand that it means no, it's dafka if you ate it in Yerushalayim, meaning that if a person was tameh and ate the Maaser Sheni chutz lachoma, that would not, it's still definitely forbidden, that there might not be Malkot, but some of the Mefashim discuss why that would be the case. But that is the difference between our two Mishnayot. One is referring to the fact that you're eating Maaser Sheni in the wrong place, and one is referring to the fact that you're eating it betum'ah. So that is Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina's answer. Right? Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina, Seifa b'Maaser Sheni Tahor, the Gavra Tahor, the Ka'achil Chutz Lachoma. The Seifa talking about where everybody's Tahor and the food is Tahor, but you're eating it in the wrong place. Reisha b'Maaser Sheni Tameh, the Gavra Tameh. And the beginning, the earlier Mishnah, where either the food was Tameh or you were Tameh, the Ka'achil b'Yerushalayim, and you even ate it in Yerushalayim. So says the Gemara now, okay, so in other words, the Chiddush is, what we understood from the Mishnah, from both Mishnayot, certainly the later one, was that it's telling us Maaser Sheni cannot be eaten outside of Yerushalayim. Okay, you would get Malkut for eating it in the wrong place. We're now saying, don't forget that you'd also get Malkut for eating it betumah. So asks the Gemara the question, says, how do we know? When Menale the mechayev alei mishum tumah. What is the source for that? Where do we find that there's a lav for eating Maaser Sheni betumah? So answer the Tanya. Rabbi Shimon Omer lo bi'alti mimeno betameh ben shani tameh v'hu tahor ben shani tahor v'hu tameh. Okay, so Rabbi Shimon, we're going to see another step soon. But Rabbi Shimon says we learn it from, we have a pasuk in this section in Parashat Kitavot, what's called the Vidui Ma'asrot. So Vidui Ma'asrot is when this takes place twice in the 7-year cycle, once in the 3rd year and once in the 6th year, where the farmer is required to come to Yerushalayim. And to clarify, what we do really Bi'ur Ma'asrot as well. So if you have anything left over, so if you have any left over of the Trumot and the Ma'asrot from the previous 3 years, which was required to bring, all that has to be given away. And he has to say a certain vidui. He has to say this confession, to say, what is the language of the confession? To say that one has gotten rid of all the trumot and masrot that were meant to not be in one's possession, meant to go out, given to the Kohen, to the Levi, to the poor, etc., that I've gotten rid of it. If you look in the Chumash, it's in Parashat Kitavo. I'll just read it. I'll just read it out for you, just to give it just a bit of context of the psukim. It says, "Ki techalel aseret kol ma'aseh tzvotcha b'shana shlishit." When you have concluded to give the all the ma'aser of your produce in the third year, shnat ha'ma'aser, natata lalevi. As I said, this will also be in the sixth year. ונתת ללוי להגיע ליתום לאלמנה, ואכלו בשעריך ושבעו. You'll give it all to the right to all the Levi, the Ger, the Yatom, the Almanah, all those who are poor, all those who need it, and they will eat and they'll be satisfied. ואמרת לפני השם אלוקיך, ביעלתי הקודש מן הבית. We're getting up to the pasuk now, which is quoted by the Gemara. It says, "You'll say, I've gotten rid of all the kodesh, all these trumot and masrot from my house." ולהגיע ליתום ולאלמנה, אני
frozen.
And this is the source where we say that Maaser Sheni cannot be eaten by an onen, and lo bi'alti mimeno. And we're back. Sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened. Can everybody hear me? Thumbs up if you can hear me. Great. Okay. So the pasuk says, "So lo achalti be'oni mimenu v'lo bi'alti mimenu b'tameh." I've not consumed of it or gotten rid of it. Tameh, which we'll explain in a moment exactly what that means. Etc. Commanded.
You're breaking up, Rabbi Kenigsberg.
Before we get into the limud here in the Gemara, because it's quite fascinating. This whole section called in a confession, and it's very strange. What he says is, I have done everything.
Rabbi Kenigsberg, you're breaking up. I don't know if you can hear me.
We don't hear you.
He can't hear you when he's frozen.
Well, you can't hear us, you're saying.
He can't hear. Right,
so
he
can you
can't
hear me?
hear you when he's frozen.
Okay.
Just like we can. He's not saying it.
Try something else.
When he starts to talk, then he can.
You're breaking up, Rabbi Kenigsberg. I don't know if you can hear him. He's still frozen. Okay.
Now.
Okay. Are we back?
You keep on breaking up, Rabbi Kenigsberg.
No. Okay. So let me try something. I'm going to hotspot my phone. See if that works a bit better.
You may just want to stop your video. That may help.
Is this any better? Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Can anyone hear me? Okay. All right. Let's give it another go. I hope this will work. So I don't know if you heard any of what I said previously. No. Okay. So did you hear the psukim?
Yes.
When I was reading the psukim, was that good or did that cut off? All right. So essentially, the question is, we're going to come back. We'll go a little bit more in depth in a moment in the Gemara because it says lo bi'alti mimeno betameh. We're trying to understand precisely what that means. And how we learn, how we derive the fact that there is a prohibition of eating Maaser Sheni b'tum'ah. But just before that, so there's something interesting about this whole section is called, and it's referred to again and again as the Vidui Ma'asrot, right? As the confession. And it's a very strange confession. It's a very strange vidui. We're used to vidui, right? We said this morning, so Bahab, on Yom Kippur, we come with Hashamnu, Bagadnu, right? Chatanu, Avinu Malkeinu, Chatanu lefanecha. What we've done wrong. Yeah, the psukim repeat again and again. Asiti kachol mitzvotecha, asiti kachol asher tzivitani. I have done everything right. I've done everything you expect of me. What kind of a vidui is that? I just want to share with you. I may have shared this in the past, but it's a tremendous idea. In the Rav Soloveitchik writes this can be found in the Rav Soloveitchik Chumash, and he says the following. I'll just read it out. He says, why is this formula referred to as confession? How can the praise of man simultaneously be the confession of man? A basic principle of Jewish thinking regarding repentance and confession is reflected in this nomenclature. Repentance is predicated on two principles. First, on the power within men to be able to accuse themselves, on their ability to think of themselves as worthy and as unworthy and inferior. In our declaration on Yom Kippur emerges the expression of self-accusation. But second, on the ability of each individual to cleanse himself, to comprehend the boundless hidden spiritual powers which are found in the human personality, which propel one in the direction of return to the sovereign of the universe, on the ability of man to elevate himself to majestic heights, even after he is sunk into the abyss of impurity. The second principle is just as important as the first. A man obviously cannot engage in repentance if he does not have the boldness to admit he has sinned. Without recognition of the sin, there can be no regret. Yet, there can be no commitment for the future if the man has no faith in his ability to rise above the sins he has committed. If he believes he is helpless and subservient to natural mechanical forces which pull him downward, if he is not convinced of the freedom of the human creative act, then he cannot feel his own guilt and he will not change. If man looks upon himself as an impotent creature, then the position of the sinner is helpless. In other words, says Rav Soloveitchik, when we have vidui, there are two aspects. There is the aspect of taking responsibility of that which we have done wrong, but there's also the aspect of understanding that we have the potential to do right, the potential that we can change, the potential that we can do things. If a person only comes and only beats himself down and say, well, it's the same thing. It's always been the same thing. It's never going to change. I'm never going to change. What's the point? Well, then there's no tshuva. That's just, self-paralysis. But if a person is able to realize that, the reason that there is tshuva, the reason there is vidui, the reason I have done things wrong is because I could have done things right. Well, that's something else. And therefore you have a vidui, which tells you focuses not on the lowliness of man, but on the greatness, on the potential. Look at all the things I've done right. Look at all the things that I can do. And that is a great form of vidui. Rav Kook writes something very, very similar, a slightly different angle. Rav Kook essentially says that, also having the vidui of that which is negative can beat us down, but we need to raise ourselves up. We need to look at the successes as well. A lot of the modern sort of self-help, motivation, productivity books talk about small wins. It's a very common thing today. It doesn't matter if you've done things perfectly or but you did something right. Give yourself a pat on the back so that it will encourage you to build that habit and carry on. So that is just a brief but important digression about vidui masrot. But so in this case, where it says, what is the limud here? It says, lo bi'alti mimeno betameh. So what are we saying? The Varmer is saying that he's brought the Trumot and the Maasrot. Here specifically, we are referring to Maaser Sheni, and we say that we did not dispose of it, we did not consume it when it was Tameh. And says the Gemara, Ben she'ani Tameh v'hu tahor, Ben she'ani tahor v'hu Tameh, meaning whether the food, the Maaser Sheni itself was Tameh and the person was Tahor, or vice versa, whether the food was Tahor and the person was tamei. But essentially, the understanding of the Gemara is as follows: that the vidui to say lo bi'atzi mimeno tamei, what are you supposed to do with maaser sheni? You're supposed to eat it when it is tahor. Meaning the implication, the person is saying, Lo bi'ati mimenu b'tamei, I did not consume of it. And there's two ways to read this. There's two ways to understand this Gemara. We could understand bi'ati means to consume. So it could be referring to eating as well, meaning I did not eat it when it was tamei. Or you could say, right, I did not dispose of it in an improper way when it was tamei, and all the more so, I did not dispose of it in an improper way when it was tahor, but certainly was not allowed to eat it when it was tamei. So that is what we learn from that. Our question was, how do we know that there's an issur of eating maaser sheni when it is either when the maaser sheni itself is tamei or when the person is tamei? And that's learned out from this lo bi'ati mimenu b'tamei, from the vidui, which the farmer says regarding the vidui maasrot. Ben shani tamei v'hu tahor, or ben shani tahor v'hu tamei. But here now says the Gemara, wait a minute. V'hechan muzhar al achila ani yodea. Says we're dealing with a prohibition for which one would get Makkot. And as we've learned and discussed many, many times, in order to get Makkot, there needs to be an azhara, there needs to be a caution, there needs to be a warning in the Torah. There's not the Torah telling you what to do. This is a narrative of the farmer, what he's saying when he brings his bikurim. It's sipur dvarim ba'alma. He's saying, lo bi'ati mimenu b'tamei. Very nice that lo bi'ati mimenu b'tamei. But where do I find that the Torah warns me and gives me an azhara, gives me a prohibition against this love? Right? So, ve'chan muzar l'achila ani yodea. So says the Gemara, wait a minute, what do you mean you don't know? It's obvious. It should be obvious that one cannot eat this food when one is tamei. Why? It says tumata guf be'edyaktiv. That we do have explicitly. We have a pasuk that tells us that when a person is tamei, they can't eat from kodshim. What is the pasuk? Tiv nefesh asher tigabo v'tama ad ha'arev v'lo yochal min hakodashim. Just read the full pasuk. You see is on the side, Vayikra Kaf Bet Pasuk Vav, Nefesh Asher Tigabo v'Tam'a ad ha'erev. So somebody who is who's come into contact with something which is going to give them a tum'ah. Lo yochal min hakodshim imrachatz besaro b'mayim. Says they cannot eat from the kodshim, which we'll explain in a moment what that means. Lo yochal min hakodshim ki imrachatz besaro b'mayim, unless they have gone and immersed in the mikveh. Now, how do we know that this pasuk is referring specifically to maaser sheni? When it says kodshim, maybe it's talking about korbanot, it's talking about other things. Well, we know this is also the first Gemara in Shas, right? The first daf of brachot, that there are certain times that if a person wants to go and eat from the korbanot, from other kodshim, so going into the mikveh is not enough. You go into the mikveh and then you have to have harev shemesh, when you have to wait. You have to wait until nightfall has passed, and then the following day one would be allowed to. It talks about the kohanim eating truma, etc. That is in the first half of the Gemara Brachot. That's what's called the Tvul Yom. The Tvul Yom we spoke about a couple of weeks ago in the drasha. A Tvul Yom is somebody who has gone to the mikveh, but a certain part of their tahara process has not been fulfilled yet. We're waiting for it till the following day, until nightfall. There are certain scenarios where not only that, but a person has to bring a korban as well. So the tefillah is not all that you need. And the famous machloket between the Pushim and the Stukim, we spoke about Parshat Chatat with the Para Aduma, that regarding the Para Aduma, Chazal said that a Tvul Yom is actually kasher to do some of the preparations with the Para Aduma. The Stukim said no. The Stukim said a Tvul Yom won't be kosher, and therefore Chachamim came along and said they made a takana that dafka a Tvul Yom has to be the one to go and engage with it in order to lotzi miliban shel Stukim, right? But in any case, so we have different times where you need tefillah b'mikveh, you need other things as well. Yeah, the pasuk says, and again, this is the part which is not quoted in the Gemara, but it says lo yachal min hakodshim ki im achatz b'saro b'mayim, meaning so long as he has rachatz b'saro b'mayim, so long as he has had tefillah, that is sufficient for him to go back and eat from the kodshim. What are the kodshim for which it would be sufficient? Just tefillah b'mikveh. That is going to be maaser sheni, and that is how we know the pasuk is referring to that. So therefore, the Torah tells us, "Be'ediaktiv nefesh shetigabo v'tamad al v'lo yachal min hakodshim." That is talking about maaser sheni. That if a person is tamei, they may not eat from it, and that is the azhara. So that is regarding a person who is tamei. What about if the Maaser Sheni itself is tamei and the person is tahor. So says the Gemara. Right, we're about a third of the way down the page, maybe a bit more. It says Ela tumat atzmo minayin. What about if the Maaser Sheni is tamei? How do we know that there is a lav? So dichtiv lo tuchal lechol bisharecha ulhalanu omer bisharecha tuchlenu hatamei v'atzahor. So we quote two psukim here. One pasuk says lo tuchal lechol bisharecha. If you have a look again on the side, the continuation of the pasuk, we've discussed this before, where the Gemara went out and dashed this whole pasuk at length. But it said lo tuchal lechol bisharecha maaser degancha v'tiroshcha v'yitzarecha. That is talking about maaser sheni. You won't be able to eat it within your gates. Maaser sheni, you cannot eat in your home, unless you live in Yerushalayim ben Chumot, right? You have to bring it to Yerushalayim, and that is where you have to eat it. So lo tuchal lechol bisharecha. Ulhalanu omer, but later on it says in a different pasuk, bisharecha tuchlenu hatamei v'atzahor. So it uses that word again, bisharecha. And over here it's referring to bechor. So from the fact that the word bisharecha is used in both psukim, we have a kind of similar to Gzera Shabbat, that we associate the Maaser Sheni on the one hand and bechor on the other hand. We're going to see in a moment exactly what we learned from it by the fact that it uses this word in both cases. And there by bechor it says bisharecha tuchlenu hatamei v'atahor. You're going to eat it, the tamei and the tahor. So what does that mean? V'tanya devei Rabbi Yishmael afilu tamei v'tahor ochlin beke'ala achat ve'en chosheshin. Okay, so what we're dealing with over here is that we have a bechor which is the firstborn animal. There's a difference between a bechor tam and a bechor ba'al mum. Again, as I said, it gets a little bit technical today, but bear with me. So when you have a bechor, the din is that the bechor is brought to the Beit HaMikdash and it's brought as a korban by the kohen. If the bechor has a ba'al mum, right, it has a blemish and therefore it cannot be brought in the Beit HaMikdash, it goes out to chulin. It is no longer kodesh. It can be eaten normally. It has still certain restrictions on giza, on shaving its wool, for example, and restrictions on having its milk. But its meat can be eaten normally, and it does not have to be eaten b'tehara. Here the pasuk says, but it teaches when it says bisharecha tochlenu hatamei v'hatahor, you can eat the tamei and the tahor. So Tanya Dvei Rabbi Yishmael, what it comes to teach us is afilu tamei v'tahor chnin beke'ala achat ve'en chosheshin. You can have two people, one is tamei and one is tahor, and they can be eating together, even from the same plate, and they don't have to be choshesh. So obviously, if one of them is tamei and he's touching the food is going to become tamei. It's not going to stay tahor. But because the pasuk says here, hatahor v'tamei ochlenu yachdav, they can eat it together. So we learn regarding this halacha, regarding this bechor, that there is no problem eating it when it is tamei. Okay. Now we bring it all back together. Since it said bisharecha, both regarding maaser sheni and regarding bechor. But by bechor it said explicitly what? It said bisharecha tochlenu hatamei v'atahor, that the tamei and the tahor can eat it together, which it did not say by maaser sheni. So therefore what we learn is this. Meaning over there, where it says explicitly that the tamei can come along and eat together with the tahor. But hata, that's hata, that's over there. But hacha lo teichol. But over here, you cannot eat together. Over here, meaning referring to maaser sheni. Okay, so that is the difference between the two, and that is where we learn out the azhara that even for whether it's the person who was tamei or it was the maaser sheni which is tamei, it cannot be eaten, and one would get Makkot for that. There's something very interesting in Rashi over here, something quite unique throughout Shas. You'll have a look. So if you see Rashi at the top where it says Hachigar Sinan, he says V'hechan muzhar al achila shelo yochlenu betum'ah eini yodea Talmud lomar lo tuchal. And where did we find this isur about eating in tameh. So that is what the pasuk says, lo tuchal. Kach yishnei b'sifrei. This drasha, so Rashi is learned out in the Sifrei, which is one of the midrashay halacha. Ukshekavua kan lo espiku legomwa, meaning it's not written here in its entirety in the Torah, in the Gemara. Ad akshe Gemara tumat aguf behed yaktiv be v'lo yochal min hakochim ki im rachatz, etc. So it's just saying that it's then the Gemara asks the question and explains it did not bring the full pasuk and the full explanation before. As we've seen. If you have a look then a couple of lines below in Rashi, you'll see it's in brackets, and this is quite something. Says the Gemara, says Rashi, or says the commentary, which until now has been attributed to Rashi. It says in brackets, it says Rabbeinu gufo tahor v'yatsa nishmato b'tala. So Rabbeinu his body was pure and his neshama left in Tara. In other words, this is where Rashi passed away. This is where he managed to write his commentary. Until this point, and beyond this, he was not able to continue in his life. Rabbeinu gufo tahor v'yatsa nishmato b'tala lo piresh yoter. And so he did not write anymore. So the parish of Rashi we have is until this point, and this is where Rashi החזיר את נשמתו לבוראו, מכאן ואילך לשון תלמידו רבי יהודה בר נתן. So from this point onwards, you'll see that the style as well of the commentary is a little bit different. It's a little bit longer. There are a few places in Shas as well where we don't have Rashi. So this is one of them. Also in Masechet Psachim, the final chapter of Psachim, we have the commentary of the Rashbam. Those who've just learned Nedarim recently in Daf Yomi, where we have in Nedarim really we have the Ran on the side, but also in Nazir where you have the commentary, which is the Mefaresh, which is not necessarily Rashi. Wherever the language, the style is a little bit different. But over here, Rashi commented until the end of Makkot up to this point, and from here onwards, it is Talmud Rabbi Yehuda bar Natan, known as the Rivan, who is going to give the commentary and the explanation. So it still says Rashi on the side, but it's going to be Rivan from now on. Okay, so says the Rivan over here. He says Kachu Lashon Habraita, Ein Yodeh Lechan Muzhar, Lekach Talmud Lomar Lo Tuchal, etc. Right. Let's see the next. Let's see just the next Dibur Matchel, because that's just what we've just seen. It says Lahala no Omer that regarding Maaser Sheni, and then we saw regarding Bechor. So he says Lahala no Omer, but Bechor Ba'amum. Here we're dealing with a Bechor, which is a Ba'amum. That Bisharecha Tochlenu, that you can eat within your gates. That does not have to be brought to the Beit HaMikdash. That can be eaten as chulim. Ule'al minei ktiv. Prior to that, it says if it will have a mum, explaining what it is. Afilu tamei v'tahor, that even tamei and tahor can eat it together. The afal gav de'asur begizav avodah, that this bechor ba'amum is learned out in the Gemara Bechorot, that there are still certain restrictions on giza, which is sharing its wool, on avodah, and using it for work, right? Because kedamrinan bechol avat nafshecha tizbach ve'achalta. As you desire, you can slaughter and you can eat it. Basar tizbach v'chata basar tizbach v'lo giza, meaning you can slaughter it to eat its meat, but you cannot use it for its wool. V'achalta v'lo liklavecha. There's another drasha. You can eat it, but cannot be fed to your animals. Basar v'lo chalav. You can eat its meat, but you cannot start milking it, etc., and a number of other drashot. So you may have thought that therefore that is still not considered chulin, it's still considered kodshim. Afilu achi tamei v'tahor chlinuto b'karachat. That nonetheless, somebody who's tamei and somebody who's tahor can sit, they can eat it together, right, from one plate. Tenechalim b'tumat aguf uv'tumat atzman. It's therefore going to be eaten. They're going to be tamei, and it's going to be tamei. Again, the person who's tamei is touching the food. It's going to become tamei. The kevan the tamei ochel b'hen, hainu b'tumat aguf ochel atahor. Since the tamei person is there eating it, so the tahor person is also eating in tumah. Kshatahor ochel imo לאחר שנגע בו, היינו טהור אוכל טומאת עצמו. Once he eats it, once he's already touched it, he's going to be eating food which is טמא, שאכל את הטמא. So that we said that would apply regarding the Bechor, but that does not apply to Maaser. Hi, Tamei Deshar Lecha Hatam. Says Rivan Bechor Ba'almum Dichtiv Be B'Sharecha. That it's only there by the Bechor Ba'almum it says you can eat B'Sharecha. Hacha Gabei Maaser Lo Tuchal. V'hainu Lo Tuchal Lechol B'Sharecha. Regarding Maaser it says don't eat. You cannot eat it within your cities. Klomar I Atal Rashai Lechol Maaser Sheni. You can't eat Maaser Sheni the same way you eat the Bechor, which also says Bisharecha. The Ba'almum, the Bechor Nechal b'tumat atzmo u'b'tumat aguf. That the Bechor Ba'almum can be eaten if it's Tamei or if you're Tamei. V'zeh asur. But regarding Maaser Sheni, that is going to be asur. Right. So all of that was to explain. All of that was to explain the difference in our Mishnah. That our Mishnah mentioned Maaser Sheni again to say that Maaser Sheni you cannot eat it not just outside Yerushalayim, but you cannot eat it b'tumah, whether tumah derives from the person or derives from the Maaser Sheni. Okay, next, then says the Gemara. Umenale devar b'diyahu. In other words, like this. What we've been discussing until now, so we said that the Maaser Sheni, the din is that Maaser Sheni, if one wants to, generally speaking, one should eat it. If one wants to eat it, one needs to bring it to Yerushalayim. But if one does not want to bring it to Yerushalayim, so then you have Pidyon. Like we said, we transfer that sanctity onto money. That can only be done outside Yerushalayim. Once you bring the Maaser Sheni into Yerushalayim, once it's inside the city, then Pidyon no longer applies anymore. However, what if you had the Maaser Sheni inside the Chomot, and then it was nitma, and then it became tameh. So once it becomes tameh, you cannot eat it. So if it's in the walls, if it's within Yerushalayim and it's tameh, so then we're saying the only thing to do now is to activate the pidyon. So the Gemara says, how do we know? How do we know that pidyon applies once it is inside Yerushalayim, meaning once it's become tamei. Minale devaptiyahu. Te'amar Rabbi Elazar. Minayin leMaaser Sheni shenitma shepodin oto afilu b'Yerushalayim. How do we know that Maaser Sheni, which has become tamei, you can do pidyon, you can redeem it, even if it's inside the walls of Yerushalayim? Talmud lomar ki lo tuchal se'eto ve'en se'et ela achila. Because the pasuk says regarding Maaser Sheni, which is nitma, that lo tuchal, you will not be able se'eto. You'll not be able to se'eto. What does that mean? So the word se'et usually means to lift up and to carry. Veisainav, for example, to lift up his eyes. But yeah, he says the word se'eto refers to, you won't be able to se'eto. The word se'et refers to eating. And se'et ela achila. That word always refers to eating. And therefore, if you won't be able to eat it, what can you do with it? Rather than pidyon. Okay, so we'll stop there. It's a good place to stop. We'll pick it up from there tomorrow. Everybody have a good day.
Yeshua, have a good day.
Thank you.
Shkoyach.
Thank you very much. Sure.